welcome back, everybody, to this edition of Walking in Spirit and Truth. And this is John Craig, and I'm glad to be with you this evening as your host for the show. And what have we been doing? We've been going through the book of Enoch, and we're already up to chapter 80 and 81. And maybe we'll even get through to 82 today. But there's so much more to be looking at, some more things that bring clarity, so much that gives vision, understanding that Enoch has recorded for us and has written down in a book, in a sefer, handed it off to his son Methuselah, who handed it off to the generations after him, who carried it through Noah, carrying it through on the ark, and then all of these writings captured, rewritten in terms of recopied, not rewritten, but recopied, so that they would be on sefers, books, scrolls, so that it would be somehow found in the different libraries of our recent history. Should I say his recent history? Maybe like from the Dead Sea Scrolls to the libraries in Egypt to other places that they have found the book of Enoch. And so it's very interesting that we see, because of the careful copying and protection of this book, we have much that we have come to find is relating to us and what we already have learned. And these things are embedded in this book, which, if you want to take the stance that Enoch was written ultimately pre-flood, and then carried through and copied through all these different years to all these different generations until we found them in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Some people, of course, we've talked about the book of Enoch, say, well, maybe the original writings came out of that 400 silent time between the prophets and the Brit Hadashah, and that somehow they came up with it and they wrote it as a metaphorical language to kind of tell us about the things of the world and things we believe in. Some people believe that, but I tend to take it back to that this is something that's been copied down from sefer to sefer, to scroll, and then preserved as the old scrolls, the old sefers were wearing out. They had the fresh copies that would preserve for the centuries. So that's where we're at. And so let me tell you real quickly about Life of Worship Ministries here in Amarillo, Texas. My wife and I, Sandi Craig, myself, John Craig, we pastor Life of Worship here in Amarillo. Glad to be part of your evening here on Lamb Network. We meet on Shabbat at noon Central Time, and where we have our Torah portion study. And you are welcome to come join us on the Life of Worship Ministries YouTube channel. So we would love for you to be part of that. And also at 3 p.m. is our encounter service. And our encounter service is at 3 p.m., which is broken into two parts, but it's really one service. But why we have it in two parts, it's simply, there's a couple different reasons, but praise, worship, ministries, and then we switch over to the second stream for a message to inspire you and encourage you. And we would love for you to join us on Shabbat for those. If you're in town, you can always come join us here locally. You can also find out what our address is, our mailing address, and where we're currently meeting until we are able to meet in a facility, which is our goal. And let me put up our website. I'll let that scroll on there. That way you can go to our website, lifeofworship.amarillo.org. And of course, if you are getting something from this ministry and from Life of Worship, and you're thinking, this is someplace where you want to invest your time, invest your finances, invest time for prayer, we certainly would love you to be praying for this ministry, partnering as a prayer partner with us, but also partnering with us financially as we're putting together the funds in order to be able to get our own place and be able to lease that out and put together the equipment, the build out, the moving expenses, and that type of thing. You can be part of that. And you can do that by going to lifeofworship.amarillo.org, and you can look at the tabs that say donate. And from that donate, you'll find the donate button. And you can go there, make a donation, make a tithe, offering, love gift. And I say sincerely from my heart, thank you for doing that. Many of you have done that, and we are so grateful because you are part of this ministry and you are what's making it tick. And so let's leave it at that. We're going to jump right back over to the book of Enoch, and like, share, subscribe, just like Terry had said earlier. And also, here's a little key to the algorithms. You can, it's great that everybody chats here during the live session, but did you know that once we close out on the show, and then you go to pull up this edition on, and you want to watch the archive, or you want to watch it over again, do you know there's still a comment box underneath the video, little video tile, and you can make comments there. And when you do, that also affects the algorithms. So something that we always like, because when people are going through and they're like, what do I want to watch, and say, well, what are the people saying about this this video and this teaching or whatever, and your comments there help people say, hey, yeah, that sounds like a good one. I'll listen. So if you want to just put something in there, don't lie, but you say, hey, great teaching, or this has been a great series, or something like that, then you can put it there. By the way, what about it? It's like if you're jumping in and it's like this is the first time you've jumped in with this on the book of Enoch, and here we're already in chapter 80 and 81, you can go to the Life of Worship Ministries YouTube channel, go to the playlist for this Walking in Spirit of Truth and Enoch series, and go all the way back to the beginning. Now, I've always said this is not just like simply a teaching, although we do teaching on it, but it's been an adventure. And that's the way I've been approaching it. And so you can find somebody that's going to take it through on a big scholarly level and whatever like that. I am just simply going through it, giving commentary on it, maybe connecting some dots for everybody. And I hope that's encouraging and inspiring. And maybe we learn something along the way. And so those are all just some other thoughts that I have for you. We're going to go to chapter 80 of Enoch and look at this. Part of this is we did do 80 last week, but I thought there's some things that we should really emphasize from that, and just kind of pull out that we might have just kind of jumped over, maybe skipped over a little bit too quickly last week, maybe not, but it does connect us to chapter 81, and this goes over to where he starts out in chapter 80. He said, "Oh, Hanok," or Enoch, "look on the sefer of the tablets of heaven, which have gradually dropped down, and reading that which is written in it, understand every part of it." Now, we did talk about how in the heavenlies, through the constellations and the stars and the naming of the stars and the naming of the planets, that it is like a book. It's like a scroll written across the skies and the heavens. It tells us about our past. It tells us about our present. It tells us about our future. And it tells us about everything we need to know about what the Father has set in place for us, and it's unveiled, and it's being unveiled to us. It's an unveiling to us. It's an apocalypse. Which is an unveiling, and that is caught up in the heavenly realms. It's like a book, and we did talk about this. Makes me wonder too if there's some type of connection in the book of Revelation where it says that the heavens are rolled up like a scroll. Now, a lot of times that's been interpreted as being, well, that sounds like a big nuclear explosion, with the way the fire and the smoke of the nuclear explosion kind of rolls up like a scroll. But did you ever think that perhaps that if the heavens are like a scroll, that it is an opening and unveiling? Now, I got to keep that stuff in context, but I just kind of had that thought. Let's go on a little bit further. And then I looked on all which was written and understood all. I looked on all that was written and understood all. Well, how did he know that? Because he's been talking to Uriel. Uriel's the angel of light, and it was Uriel that was teaching him. Now I just think about the brain capacity of Enoch to be able to know and get and understand that every one of those names, because in the Hebrew language, when you have a name, that name means something. And one of the young men that's been part of Life of Worship has done some teaching on the different names of different stars and stuff, and they have these Hebrew names, and when you decipher those names, then they have this meaning, and it's the revealing of all these scriptural concepts that we have from Genesis to Revelation. And so All right, so let's move on a little bit further on. And all the children of flesh upon the earth during the generations of the world. Well, wait. Then I looked, and all which is written, understood all, reading the Sefer and everything in it, in all the works of man, and of all the children of flesh upon the earth during the generations of the world. Immediately after I blessed Yahweh, the King of glory, who has thus forever formed the whole workmanship of this world. So it's like the story of creation is throughout the heavenly realms. Did you ever think about this? That at the time of Enoch, there were certain stars that were seen at his point in time that revealed things, that those stars are no longer visible. Do you ever think about that? And then that there are stars that are visible today that were not visible during his time because the light of those stars had not reached our planet yet for us to be able to see them. And so we have this story of creation that's written up there, and we have like the main ones that are always there, and they've been there for centuries and millennia. And you think, did you realize that perhaps there's certain stars that tell our individual stories? Because of the way the stars come and go, that there are stars that they disappear, they burn out, they merge with other stars, or they simply can't be seen any longer. But from our perspective, if that name of that star, it had a name, and there's a definition and there's a meaning to it, then there's this evolving story that's unfolding our present, and it's unfolding our future. Okay, that's kind of pretty wild stuff to me when I think about that. It's like way beyond my comprehension. But to think that perhaps that's one of the things that the Father does, and it's really important. And yet today, most of us barely know where the Big Dipper is, or the North Star is, and let alone these other constellations that are up there, let alone all these other different stars that are not all named, and let alone be able to identify the planets. Do you know that there's actually an alignment of planets that are coming on, I think it's like January 25th. There's an alignment of 6 planets, and by February 28th, there's going to be an alignment in the sky of 7 planets. So we being number 8, and because Pluto is not considered a planet any longer, but in other words, every planet from Mercury to Neptune to Uranus, every one of those will be visible in the sky, and from one horizon all the way across to the other horizon. Now, some of those you'll actually be able to see with the naked eye. For example, Venus, of course, you'll be able to see Saturn, Mars, Jupiter, and there might be another one. I can't remember which one it was I was reading about that you can see with the eyes. Now, there's some that you're going to have to use a telescope for. And for example, Neptune, Uranus, you'll have to use maybe a telescope or binoculars. Binoculars, you'll be able to see them, and if you know where to look. But if you can just imagine to see all of those in our night sky in the end of February, all of those visible, the signs of the heavens, telling us a story. And what does that mean when those stars line up? And what would be the Hebrew name of those stars? And when they're lined up like they are, do they tell us something? You know how you line up the sons of Jacob? And have you ever noticed that sometimes you see the sons of Jacob in birth order, and sometimes you'll see the sons of Jacob not in birth order, but a different order, but they're all listed. And yet when you form the idea of the meaning of every one of their names in a sentence form, they construct something with great meaning. So it's going to be kind of like a big bow, like a big bow across the sky, considering all of that. It's just something very interesting to me. Let's go on to chapter 80. Then verse 5, and I glorified Yahweh on account of the long suffering and blessings towards the children of the world. So he's got a lot of patience for us. and his blessing to the children of the world. Did you ever, just the thought that he's under, that he's so patient with us. And this is the time is written back in the time of Enoch. There's a lot of stuff happening before the flood. I mean, it's the whole reason that this corruption is going on in the world, that the world's going to be destroyed by this great flood. And then it says that he blesses and he has great patience. And you think, wow. And I guess at a certain point in time, it's like, okay, time's up. It's time to, and no more patience. And that's, of course, that's what we understand when Yeshua returns. It's like, well, everyone's had their opportunity. They've had their opportunity to repent. They've had their opportunity to lay down that past life, everything that they've done, every sin, confess before Yahweh, to turn around and pursue him and to love him face to face. In other words, to give him glory. So the weightiness of glory comes into their life, and they'll be saved. And at some point in time, they'll be out of time. Some people are of the belief that when the Antichrist, anti-Messiah figure comes on the scene, that all of a sudden the age of grace will be over. The Holy Spirit is removed from the earth, and that's it. Nobody else can be saved after that point. I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that type of stance, because I believe that the patience, that character of Yah is long suffering. It does wait to every last possible moment to give us that opportunity to repent. And yet it's been used by many evangelicals in order to scare people into heaven, so to speak, and scare people into eternal life. And I don't think we need that approach. In fact, there's so much that when one begins to read the word, that if one is really truly seeking, that there's things that the Father just reveals, and it's like, why would I ever think that there's any other type of philosophical view about the creator or the origins of the universe? Whatever. I'm just making fun, but when even the heavens show the workmanship of Yah, and so much that we miss, because there's so many different distractions. You ever think about, this whole modern lifestyle that we all have, that sometimes it's, we think all these different conveniences are such a blessing to us, when in reality, perhaps they're not a blessing to us. Maybe they are more of a curse, because of all the distractions, and it creates a naivete. It creates ignorance. It creates a desire not to search out like we need to. And you think about how many people, because of that, go through some very significant hardships that cause them to dig deep and to ask the big questions of the why, or seek after the man of Yah, which is the who is it, why is it, what is it, what is that deep meaning that makes that life makes sense even when it hurts so desperately. And so let's move on a little bit further. In verse 6, at this time I said, blessed is the man who shall die righteous and good, against whom no catalog of crime has been written, and with whom iniquity is not found. And we talked about that last week. And what a blessing it is to be able to walk, to have a halakha that's considered righteousness. That righteousness is the halakha. It's the walking out the word in spirit and truth. And so we have the 10 commandments. There's what we've called the 613 commandments. There's really, and more so because the prophets open up that whole idea of loving our neighbor, the whole idea of our prayer life, our worship life, our walking in the supernatural power of Yah, in the manifestation of the gifts of the Spirit. All of these things that are truly, this is the halakha, this is the walk that we have, and that's righteousness. And it says that, how blessed is the man who shall die righteous and good. These are the things. It says no catalog of crime has been written, and iniquity is not found. I mean, there's the blessing of verse 7. And then those three holy ones caused me to approach and placed me on the earth before the door of my house. And they said unto me, explain everything to Methuselah, your son, and inform all your children that no flesh shall be justified before Yahweh, for he is their creator. And so okay, where was Enoch? I mean, was he actually physically taken somewhere else to be taught, trained? And again, what's the type of brain capacity to be able to take everything in about all of creation? And then he's got to pass this knowledge and this wisdom to his son Methuselah. And we know that Methuselah dies right before the flood, but it's also so that Methuselah will teach his children, and that his children will be aware to teach their children. Well, we know that the next round of children is Noah, and then Shem and Ham and Japheth. We and then from there, they're supposed to carry it on and go further. And except it seems like the sons of Ham are just kind of messed up. But so we have this concept of continuing and teaching. And he says, during 1 year, we shall leave you with your children until you shall again recover your strength, that you may instruct your family, write these things, and explain them to all your children. But in another year, they shall take you from the midst of them, and your heart shall be strengthened, and the elect shall point out righteousness to the elect. Okay, now, what is it saying here? What's it look like? First off, whatever was going on with Enoch, they're alluding to the fact that he said, you need to get your strength back. So it could have been really overwhelming. If you think in a physical body, think of yourself, and you're taking through this deep, expansive experience in the heavenly realms and the earthly realms and all the different parts of the world, and even being able to see the world from the perspective of space, to see all of these different dimensions. What does it do to the body? What's it do to the soul of Enoch? And I would think, in essence, if we always tend to think that the time of Enoch was, might have been pretty rustic, pretty, very pre-modern times. I mean, just very, very, your tools are very limited. Your housing is, not like plush, and how do you transport? How do you get around? Are you relying on beasts of burden in order to do what you need to do? I mean, I kind of have that picture. Some people would say, maybe they had all sorts of modern conveniences then, but they also got destroyed, and then everything had to reboot from a very, very what's the right kind of thought, a very simple lifestyle, and all of those modern conveniences gone. Who knows what it was like before the flood? It seems like they're mixing genetics and all that, and then we see like some of these ancient hieroglyphs, hieroglyphs. Sorry. Okay, these hieroglyphs, and that are like etched into stone. That some of these things that are etched into stone, could they possibly have been pre-flood? And yet we do have some of these hieroglyphs that are, for example, from India and Iran, and some of those areas where it even looks like and even Egypt, where there's like, well, that's a flying saucer, or that's someone flying on a carpet, that which is some type of flying machines. Well, where did that come from? Was that pre-flood, post-flood? Where would it be? What was going on with Enoch? But even still, if you think, even if it was like even more modern than the stuff that we have today, what would it actually, in the experiences that he had, what physical toll was it taken on his body, because you see him almost like he's going in between the dimensions of the natural and the dimensions of the spiritual. And for a physical body to be in both realms might be pretty taxing. And so when he says, you've got a year until you shall again recover your strength, but in this time you're going to instruct your family. That must have been mind-blowing. I mean, how many naysayers do we know? If we were to have such an experience like that in our family, it's like, you wouldn't believe what I just went through. You wouldn't believe what I just saw. They're like, whatever, that you just had some crazy pizza dream or whatever. But here he's like, you got a year, you got to explain these things, and you're going to write them down in a book. Enoch would have been the library of Enoch himself. If he wrote every single thing, I mean, think about what we have here in what we have, the book of Enoch. But how much more did he write down to explain the things to his family? I think about the library room in the ark, in Noah's ark, the library room, which Noah would have taken all of these scrolls from his father and put them in and secured them in order to make it through the flood. And then the other thing is that did they know how to read? Did some of them say that Enoch was credited with the first written language? Is that true? Maybe not. Not quite sure. But if he is credited with that early paleo writing, did he teach Methuselah how to read, so that Methuselah could not only just read, and he could read it to his children, but Methuselah could teach his children to read, which means, and ultimately Noah, and then the sons of Noah, and going on from there. It doesn't tell us those things, but from a natural perspective, you think there's a lot going on here, and these people aren't just like cavemen. I mean, seriously, they're not that Neanderthal, so to speak. They're not. They're and that's a phrase, by the way, that's just a phrase that's been used because of those evolutional people. I'm not saying I'm believing in evolution. I'm just saying in terms of the concept of kind of a prehistoric kind of person that's doesn't have all the modern conveniences like we've had today. Okay. All right. So these are just my thoughts, but I'm thinking about the culture and the time and all of that they were talking about. So, and that he's going through, and maybe he's experiencing, he's having to think about his family. But the main thing, and these main points comes out here, that the elect shall point out righteousness to the elect. The righteous with the righteous shall rejoice, congratulating each other. So it's like, hold true, stay the path. That's really important. And then when you walk through difficult times and difficult things, and we're lifting one another up, and then praising Yah and celebrating as we make it through these circumstances. And yet he says, but the sinners with sinners shall die, and the perverted with the perverted shall be drowned. And see, there you go. There's the drowning again. Remember in the book of Giants, the book, you see that these giants, if you remember when we were going through the book of Giants, that one of the giants had a dream about a flood, and here in verse 10, and the perverted with the perverted shall be drowned. And we know that the perverted is talking about this mixed gene creature called a giant, and this is mixed with the gene of the angelic and with the human, and they're going to be drowned. And those likewise who act righteously shall die on account of the works of man, and shall be gathered together on account of the works of the wicked. And in those days they finish conversing with me, and I return to my fellow men, blessing Yahweh of worlds. So I mean, it's kind of like, this is what's going on. I'm going to tell them this, and and he's wrapping it up, and then now after he spends that time with his family, he goes back to his fellow men, back to the community. I mean, I think Enoch must have been a preacher of righteousness, like Noah was a preacher of righteousness. So, chapter 81. Now, my son Methuselah, all these things I speak unto you, and I write for you. To you I have revealed all, and have given you Sepharim, books, scrolls of everything. See? That's why it's like, I think there's more than, like this book of Enoch. It looks like Methuselah got the whole Encyclopedia Britannica version of everything. Just remember that. Remember when they used to have those encyclopedias fill up an entire bookshelf? Well, yeah, he got the whole version of it, and plus, so it seems like, did a year go by? He's like, okay, I've talked to you about all these, and I've written them all down for you, and I've revealed everything that I know. Now I'm giving you the books, so now preserve them. He tells them, preserve them, and that you may reveal them to the future generation. Verse 3, wisdom I've given you to your children and your posterity, and that they may reveal to their children for generation forever this wisdom in their thoughts, and that those who comprehend may not slumber, but hear with their ears, that they may learn this wisdom and be deemed worthy of eating wholesome food. So think about this. There's some more things to be revealed. And one is that it is expected that from generation to generation it's taught, and that every generation holds fast, they hold true to the teaching, they hold true to the truth of the word that's being taught. Why is it that in our modern society that we have our generation as parents, that oftentimes we don't see our children standing on our shoulders to take it even further and deeper and longer, and to be able to do even greater things? Why is it that so many children of believers that are some are just simply lost? They're in the category of the sinners. They're in the category of the doubters, the unbelievers, and we know what happens. I mean, Enoch has spoken specifically of what happens to them, and we're like, well, maybe they're just late bloomers. Maybe they're just, they when they get older, maybe when they start having a family, and the values start to mean something. Why is it that that's not necessarily true? That might have been true in prior generations, that they were the sowing of the oats, the wild oats, and then they come back around and dig into their faith and make sure their family's walking that narrow way. Why is it that we don't have this pattern that's being taught here, so that each generation understands and knows and highly values them? But he says something else, this wisdom in their thoughts, so this is wisdom. He's teaching wisdom. They keep it in their thoughts. And then he also says that those who comprehend may not slumber. Now, have we not heard that in the book of Ephesians, where it says, awake, awake, O sleeper? I think it's in Ephesians chapter 4, and where it says in verse 14, chapter 5 of Ephesians, for this reason it says, awake, sleeper, and rise from the dead, and Messiah will shine on you. Therefore be careful how you walk, not as unwise men, but as wise, making the most of your time, because the days are evil. So then do not be foolish, but understand what the will of Yahweh is. And so that I think is kind of an interesting thing, because how it really connects us with what he says here, and that this wisdom in their thoughts. So wisdom is associated with being awake. A wisdom in their thoughts, that those who comprehend may not slumber. So if we're slumbering, and perhaps that's saying that we're not walking in wisdom. And so that those who comprehend may not slumber, but hear with their ears, because when you sleep, how well do you hear? I mean, unless you're a very light sleeper, you're basically not sleeping at all if you hear every single thing. But if you're a deep sleeper and when you go to sleep and you sleep hard, then you won't hear anything. And but hear with their ears, that they may learn this wisdom and be deemed worthy of eating wholesome food. Now, okay, first thing first the natural is like eat wholesome food. Well, what is wholesome food? Well, it's definitely not perverted food, right? Where it's the genetically modified food. It's definitely not eating pig or shrimp, because that's harmful to the body. It's wholesome food. Food is food. Things that are not food are things like shrimp and pig and shellfish and lobster and camel and badger and bear and rabbit, and I mean those are not food. Catfish, those are not food, but people eat them. Does that make those things food because people eat them? No, it doesn't. It doesn't make it food as all. By definition of what food is something that is wholesome. It is scriptural. It is what Yah declares before us as clean, because we're supposed to understand and discern between the clean and the unclean, and that also speaks about what we eat. And besides other aspects of life, Terry says kosher. Yeah, I mean that's another way to say it. That's how the Orthodox Jews call it. So it's very important to understand that. And in my opinion, it doesn't mean that you cannot have a cheeseburger, but that's a whole nother thing. But because they would say that's not kosher because you're eating your dairy with your meat, but that is an oral law, an oral tradition that is not in Scripture. They just pontificate from Scripture from that. Okay, with respect to the progress. Okay, so wait, hold on. When verse 4, blessed are all the righteous, blessed are all who walk in righteousness, in whom is no crime, as in sinners, when all their days are numbered. And we talked about that last week in terms of the days that are numbered for the sinners, as opposed to the righteous that live in eternity in the presence of Yah. Because when one lives in an eternity outside of the presence of Yah, then the only days that you were living in were before the days that you died. Because outside of that, everything is death, everything's separation from Yah, everything is complete destruction for eternity. So that's why their days, in other words, their days of living, are numbered unless they repent. So now get this. He throws us in. So here we have this little thing. He's like, I'm encouraging you, Methuselah. And now he goes back to this whole idea of the progress of the sun in heaven. And it enters and goes out of the gate for 30 days, and the leaders of the 1,000 classes of stars, and with 4 which are added and appertain to the 4 quarters of the year, which conduct them and accompany them at 4 periods. Respecting these, men greatly err. Okay, this is really important. This is very, very significant, I think, to look at this, because now he goes back into the calendar, and he says, look, this is the calendar. It's divided into 4 quarters, and in the 4 quarters, each month has their number of days. And then it says, with 4 which are added and appertain to the 4 quarters of the year, which conduct them and accompany them at 4 periods, respecting these. Where did I read that? So it's, okay. With respect to the progress of the sun, it enters and goes out of the gate for 30 days. The leaders of the 1,000 classes of the stars, with 4 which are added. So what are the 4 that are added? So at the end of the quarter, a day is added, and then the next quarter begins. And what is that added day? It's the It is the intercalary day, and then you enter the next quarter. So those are the 4 that are added. That's part of the 4 periods you have. Then you have the added day, and then you go into the next quarter. And this is really important because he says, respecting these men greatly err, and do not calculate them in the calculation of every age, for they greatly err respecting them, nor do men know accurately that which are in the calculation of the year. But indeed, these are marked down forever, one in the first gate, one in the third, one in the fourth, and one in the sixth. So it's telling you when the intercalary day is added right there, so that the year is completed in 364 days. So you have to have the 4 intercalary days in each quarter in order to total 364 days. But he says, if you don't calculate your months this way, then you are in great error. And if you're in great error, you're not going to be able to calculate every age. It says, men do not know, nor do men know accurately that these are in the calculation of the year. And so this is where people, and I seem like I don't mean to be beating a dead horse, but if this is how, when one is looking at the prophetic calendar, and you're also looking at the calendar of history in the past, can miss the days. If you don't have this proper calculation, then how do you know that Passover is on the day it's supposed to be? And if you're celebrating Passover on the wrong day, and there is a historical and prophetic significance to it, then one might possibly miss the sound of the shofar. I mean, seriously, think about this. Why would Yeshua give us this parable of the virgins, saying that they were asleep, they're slumbering? Okay, we just went over that. But then there's the sound of the shofar, and all 10 virgins wake up, and they trim their lamps. And the 5 virgins had an extra oil. Why? Because they woke up where they were burning through their oil, but they had extra oil so that they could keep their lamps going. But the others had oil, but because of the delay, their lamps were going out, and they couldn't get any oil from the first 5. But so what does it mean? Could that be maybe it's because the sound of the shofar blowing and the awakening is saying, okay, that feast day when Yeshua and this is coming, and the sound of the shofar is blowing, is the time that we're going to be gathered, and we're brought inside through the gate. Okay, through the door. And because we're on the right calendar, then we're on the right prophetic date of his return. But if we didn't have it calculated correctly, and we're greatly erring because we're following a Hillel calendar or a moon, following a moon cycle instead of this 30-day calendar, it'll throw people off. And they're celebrating Passover, they're celebrating Shavuot, they're celebrating the Feast of Trumpets or Sukkot, and they're thrown off a day or two or a week or two. And because they're thrown off, it's like they didn't keep the oil going long enough because they weren't studying these things out. And so I think maybe there's a connection with that. I think there's possibly a connection with that. And that's why it says men greatly err. And so I'm really grateful that we've been able to study out the high priestly calendar, and to look at that, and to experience that together with you. And many of you all have stayed with us and are following that calendar. And if you don't know and you want to learn a little bit more about that, then you can go over to our Life of Worship Ministries YouTube channel and go to the priestly calendar series and get some of that background, get some of that understanding, and you'll see that perspective that we're coming from. But study it out. Just don't take it because of what we're saying. But this is what we feel is really solid. And the more I study it, the more I look at it. And even here, looking at Enoch, the more it makes sense. Going on, it says, truly has been stated and actually has been calculated that which is marked down for the luminaries, the months, the fixed periods, the years, and the days. Now, keep in mind, months, the Hebrew word for months is not the word that's also translated as moon. Okay? Those are two different words, because when it uses months, it's specifically talking about the beginning of a month. That is, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's a conjunction moon. In fact, I don't think it ever is in the course of a year. Could be wrong. I don't think it ever is. I don't think it ever. I mean, it may be close, but so we got to keep that in mind. You know, I think the Hillel calendar, because it fluctuates using that the moon month, that there's a possibility that it could shift and actually align every once in a while. You know my illustration about a stop clock is right twice a day. So, okay, going on. Uriel has explained to me and communicated to me, whom Yahweh of all creation on my account commanded according to the might of heaven and the power which it possesses both night and by day, to explain light to man of the sun, moon, and stars, and of all the powers of heaven, which are turned with their respective orbs. So keep in mind that this is part of that education process, that learning process, that teaching process, the schooling process that Uriel was teaching. And by understanding the progress of the sun and the sun and the moon, the progress of the sun and the moon and the stars is not the moon is not because it's calculating the month. The moon and the sun is because they're entering in on the horizon at a particular gate on the horizon, and it goes down at a particular gate of the horizon. And it shifts because of the tilt of the axis of the earth. And so it shifts as the earth progresses around the sun. So it's going to look like the sun is moving on the horizon where it comes up and where it goes down. And that's what's called the gates. And the same thing is with the moon, where it comes up on the horizon and where it goes down on the horizon. It's because of those are the gates. It's not for the calculation of the month itself, but so much as where it rises on the horizon and where it goes down on the horizon. And the same thing as it was with the stars and, the constellations. We talked about that. There's a particular constellation that is directly overhead at a particular place on each particular month of the year. And when you have a 30-day month, you're going to see accurately the lining of those constellations. If you have a 28-day month, it's going to shift, and as opposed to one month is always going to have one constellation with it. If you have a lunar year with the lunar months, then that constellation may not always necessarily line up with that particular month. It's always going to be shifting. And then you got to throw in a whole extra month in order to get caught up or whatever, and shift your whole calendar year again. And that's the danger of that. But what Enoch was taught by the angel Uriel, the angel of light, is how these things work, and made it very, very clear. And then you think about the orbs. So if you put in, so what are the orbs? That possibly is a reference to the planets, where at that point in time, it's only those that could visually be seen. And so what we visually see now is we know for sure when we see Venus, we know for sure when we see Mars and Saturn and Jupiter, because we can see those things with the naked eye. And so they have certain patterns within the sky, and they hold to those certain patterns, and and there's particular alignments, and that teaches us something too, and holds a lot of value. And that's what Uriel was talking about as well. This is the ordinance of the stars, which set in their places, in their seasons, in their periods, in their days, and in their months. These are the names of those who conduct them, who watch and enter in their seasons according to the ordinance, in their periods and in their months and in their influence and in their stations. Again, it's repeating what I just said, that unless, if you are going off of a lunar calendar, you're not always going to have those particular things. The sun's not going to be rising in the one part of the horizon and going down on the other part of the horizon on the same month every year, because you've shifted too much. You're missing 2 days out of the month. And that month is 24 days in the course of an entire year, of a entire shift, and that month is not going to be the same as next year. But here, this teaching about the calendar is very specific, and they never change. And that's one of the aspects of Yah, is that he never changes. We don't have to go through a guessing game with the calendar. We don't have to go through a guessing game with the Most High, because it's set. It's impossible for him to lie. Well, if you have a lunar calendar that's constantly shifting and moving, and your month is constantly shifting and moving, then you have always these uncertainties, and you're having to do specific calculations and shiftings of adding a month and all of that. And it can be very confusing. And then you have to rely on the rabbis. You have to rely on them, who are not believers, to tell us when a particular month begins, when Passover begins, when, all the feast days, all that sort of stuff. And I don't think that's right. I think that it's not supposed to be exclusively held to a particular small group of people because of their calculations, because they wanted to depart. That was one of their reasons. They departed from the truth, and they changed the times and the seasons. All right. Am I on a little rant? Am I just kind of, or are y'all tracking with me? I hope you're tracking with me. But when I read through this, it's just so amazing. 4 conductors, this is verse 11, 4 conductors of them first enter the 4 quarters of the year. After these, 12 conductors of their classes, who separate the months and the year. 364 with their leaders of 1,000, who distinguish between the days, as well as between the 4 additional ones, which the conductors divide in the 4 quarters of the year. So here's the 4 additional ones, or those 4 intercalary days. Then we also have the 4 conductors. Now we're talking about these quarters. We're talking about these 12 conductors, which are the months. Then you have these 364, and with the leaders of 1,000. And I think about Moses and talking about the leaders of 1,000s, leaders of hundreds, and leaders of 50s, leaders of 10, that type of thing. But these are, for example, those leaders, I think they're related particular to these particular star groups that are always going to be associated with each day, with each month, and with each quarter. And they're all connected and always stable and always can be read and always visual at those particular times of the year. So these leaders of 1,000 are in the midst of the conductors, and the conductors are added, each behind a station, and their conductors make the separation. These are the names of the conductors who separate 4 quarters of the year, who are appointed. And then it goes on and it starts to list them. Melkel, Himlamelech, Melial, and Narel. So I'm going to stop right there because we're out of time, but we're going to have to go into those names. Maybe we can find out the definition of their names, see if I can find something on it this week. But I hope you got something out of this week. Join us for Life of Worship this next week on Shabbat. We'd love for you to come join us and be part of the chat, be part of our online congregation. And until next time, it's been a good time with you. Shalom, shalom.
If you missed today's show or want to watch it again or want to tell someone where they can watch this episode, go to lambnetwork.tv where you will find this show and all the other live Lamb show archives in the on-demand section of the website. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to tell someone about the Messianic Lamb Network. We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussions, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the lambnetwork.tv website. I'm Sandi Craig, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.
Thank you.